Give me big old buckets of butter beer. Give me big old barrels of butter beer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here of the sweet old butter beer.
Welcome to the Three Broomsticks. We invite you to pull up a chair, grab a butter beer, and settle in for a hearty discussion about Harry Potter. I'm Sam Williams.
I'm Aurelia Lieb.
And I'm Sierra Obermark. And today we have a returning guest, arguably maybe the quickest returning guest in history. We have Tiffany!
Hello!
Hi. For those of you who don't remember, Tiffany was on episode 34, Missing Characters from the Battle of Hogwarts, subtitled, The Dementors Are Basically Pac-Man. So we had a rip-roaring good time on that episode, and we will have another great one. Tiffany is also part of our Harry Potter themed D&D that we have begun recording.
Yes,
that
indeed.
will be up on our Patreon.
Exciting.
Woohoo! So Tiffany, do you want to give the listeners just a brief recap of your favorites and your house?
Of course. I am Slytherin through and through every day. My favorite book is still Goblet of Fire. I just loved that entire book, front to end. And my favorite character is still Hermione. She and I would be besties in the library.
Amazing.
Very nice.
And you know what's crazy? Between the last episode and this episode, Tiffany, Sierra, and I have all actually seen each other in person.
This is true.
Sierra's having a baby boy named Galvatronix Jonathan Stewart Overmark. In November. And so we were all at her baby shower in San Diego. It was great. We had a great time. It was awesome to meet you in person.
I had such fun.
And if you listeners would like to be a guest and then meet us in person, please contribute to our Patreon, where Sierra will get pregnant again and hold a different baby shower.
Is that a new tier that we're offering? Get Sierra pregnant?
Yes.
No. Please no. Yeah, the way that was phrased definitely sounded like if you meet us at a Patreon event, then that is where it will happen. And I'm going to go with a blanket no for that.
We can bring Mr. Overmark. It's fine. It's a lot more legal than it sounds.
Somehow I have the feeling that a certain husband might have a problem with that.
I said we can bring Mr. Overmark. It's fine.
I'm not sure any
We're
of
just
this
going to
is
shut this
fine.
down. No, none of this is okay. And we're going to shut it down now.
We made it 3 minutes into this episode? Anyway. It's very nice to have you, Tiffany. I'm very sad I wasn't at the meetup. There's this tiny little ocean between all of us, and then a lot of land mass. But I'm sure maybe at some point we'll manage to all be together in the same place. But today, for episode number 41, we've gathered to discuss dragons. And I'm very excited. Not saying my usual sentence of read the chapter, but I'm going to give you a slight warning. There are going to be dragon-related spoilers, even though Sam's definitely asked me to keep certain things spoiler-free, so we'll try.
Please.
But other parts of them might not be spoiler-free. So for all sorts of dragon-themed things, books, movies, shows, games, we will say whenever we start talking about a new game, book, show, that sort of stuff. But just be mindful that there'll probably be spoilers.
Indeed.
Mostly dragon-related spoilers, so I'm hoping that for most of the content, it's either not a surprise that dragons are in it, or not shocking the information that we're talking about. You know, we're not going into too many plot details.
Yeah, for example, the entire discussion around A Song of Ice and Fire, or if you just watch the TV shows Game of Thrones, is basically just about dragons and not at all about, who's John's parentage and that sort of stuff like that.
Yeah, we don't go into all that.
A huge thanks to fellow Principian and former two-time guest Christian Richardson over at our Patreon, who brought this round of drinks at the pub. Thank you, Christian. I expect to be handed a butterbeer next time I'm over at your house.
Okay.
Woo! Thank you, Christian.
I don't have any expectations, Christian. Just thank you for giving us money.
He'll love that.
Wow.
If you would like to buy us a round at the pub, head on over to patreon.com/3broomsticks with the numeral 3 to sign up. So that's 3 broomsticks. Nope. That's patreon.com/3broomsticks to sign up. We're offering bonus contents. You can do chats with the host, like if you want to get to know us, and on-episode shout-outs to our patrons. We would really appreciate your help in keeping on the lights at 3 Broomsticks so we can talk about Harry Potter for a long time to come, including Sierra and I doing a Hogwarts Legacy playthrough. Which will be a little bit of a higher tier. We officially started recording that the other day. We created our character. He, she, or they is very exciting to look at. They're hot. And it'll be a really fun... they're adorable. They are definitely a minor, so they're not hot. They're adorable. They're fun. It's cool. And may or may not have vibrant pink hair. We'll see. You'll just have to watch it. So yeah. Come on over to Patreon, help us out, keeping the lights on, making sure the podcast runs, give us some comments, some reviews, all that good stuff. It's very helpful, and we love you for it.
Hello, 3 Broomsticks listeners. This is the voice of Patrick, your editor, and I just wanted to step in here real quick before the episode got too far deep into itself to just say hello and to explain a few technical things that are going to be happening throughout this episode and some unfortunate things that happened. The first thing, though, I want to start out by saying just real quick while I have this second to address you all in this episode is that way back at the beginning of the year, I was scheduled to be on an episode where we were celebrating a specific number. I think it was episode 30 or something like that. And I was scheduled to be on that episode. And since then, I've been on once. But it was announced by the hosts that I was diagnosed with leukemia. And so over the last 8 months or so, I've been getting chemo, going through my treatment plan, and all the different sort of things that are associated with that. And I just wanted to let everyone know that everything is going great. And as of this point in my treatment, it appears that there is no cancer left in me. It's not official that I'm in remission or anything like that. I still have to finish my entire treatment plan, which will take me until probably February or so of next year. So I have now a good 6 or 7 months left of treatment and all this. But I just wanted to step in and say thank you to everyone who thought of me at the time when they announced it and anyone who's thought of me since then. I also want to say thank you to the hosts again for being so gracious in allowing me to take some time off when I need it here or there, and for being so just good friends, I guess. I really appreciate it. So in terms of the technical issues, unfortunately for me, one of the things that happened was I had a hard drive go bad. And I don't think it's necessarily out for good, but that hard drive was the hard drive that I have been using for all of my 3 Broomsticks files. And you may say, Patrick, why don't you have all those things backed up? I had a few things backed up, but most of it lived on this hard drive. And so unfortunately, you may notice in this episode and a few episodes coming up that I don't have my bank of sound effects and things that I've built up over the last year or so working on this show to have to fall back on. So I did include a few small things in this episode, but for example, I didn't include the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 at the end. I didn't include just a few things that I normally would put in the episode because I just don't have access to those files right now. But there is hope. I'm hoping I can save some of the information from the drive. And so hopefully in the future, you'll be able to hear everything the way that it has been going. And if not, I promise the episodes of 3 Broomsticks will only sound better in the future moving forward. So regardless, it should work out well for everybody. But I just wanted to explain why there might be a few things missing, whether you would have noticed it if I pointed it out or not. And another thing I have to point out is that Sierra was actually recording the beginning part of this episode with a different mic input selected. So everything before this moment in time where I'm talking to you right now, Sierra sounds a little bit different than she will when she comes back in. So you'll notice the quality of her track come up. So they did a great job while they were recording to notice something was wrong and to fix it. So from here on out, the rest of the episode, it will sound great. And unfortunately, Sam actually did the exact same thing, had a different mic input selected, but he did not notice throughout the entire episode. So his track will sound the same across the whole thing, but I tried as hard as I could to make it sound good, and I think it sounds good. You probably hadn't even noticed anything up to this point, so don't let that bother you. But in the future, it will probably sound a little bit better. And one last thing I have to mention before we get back into the episode proper is that the hosts are going to be talking about Amortentia here in a second in relation to a comment that was on a previous episode. So thank you, everybody who's been commenting on the episodes. That's really great. And we love talking about those and looking at those on the website. But in the comment, they're going to be talking about Amortentia. And in this episode and the previous episode that they are referencing, both times it was mentioned that the smell of grass or a forest, or the smell that basically that the earth gives off after rain, is a smell that's very pleasing to people. And I just wanted to shout out and say that there is actually a scientific term for that, and it is what is known as petrichor. So if the smell that the earth gives off after rain is something that might interest you a little bit, be sure to look up petrichor on like Wikipedia or online or whatever. I think it's actually a really interesting article to look up and to read up on, because it's a pretty fascinating thing. But I just wanted to mention that. And so now back into the episode.
Let us offer a toast to the comments on episode 38. This episode was about Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Chapter 9, Half-Blood Prince. We raise our glass to commenter Absent-Minded Raven, who said, regarding Amortentia, for me, probably something like cinnamon or mixed spice, but I can't think what the others would be. That's interesting. I like that. People do have subtly individual odors. Researchers reckon that people, particularly women, subconsciously recognize some sort of genetic compatibility through smell. I agree that Amortentia perfume is just as sus as dosing someone with it, though I also like the aromatherapy idea. And wearing a scent that you like seems good advice in general. Why walk around all day disliking your own smell in the hopes of attracting someone who likes something you find unpleasant?
Fascinating. What scents do you think you all would smell with Amortentia?
That's an excellent question.
I think I would probably also have cinnamon, because I really love cinnamon. Potentially something like the woods after it has rained, because I always love how that smells.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably have to say something with strawberries. I love strawberries.
I'm not sure. I mean, like, from what does the person that you like smell like, something flowery he'd smelled at the Burrow style. My husband tends to have very similar like colognes and deodorants, so even when he gets different ones, they all seem to have some sort of, I don't know, probably sandalwood or something like that in it, so that would probably be part of it, I would assume. And then
one would hope
probably coffee.
Coffee's a good smell, though.
Mm-hmm. I've always liked the smell of coffee. Even when I didn't drink it, I always loved the smell.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, it would probably be definitely some sort of chocolate. I would guess chocolate banana bread. Because that is like an all-time like Williams household baked routinely while I was growing up. And even today, I'm planning to bake some. And then like the smell of a book when you first open it.
Oh, yes. Or just an old library.
Yeah. And then the ocean breeze for sure.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
I think I'd probably end up with something closer to the forest than
I was going to say, I think that's the same for me, because I didn't grow up anywhere near the ocean. So I
did. I just have always liked forests and mountains, I think, better. I remember being one of the only ones, I think it was like my 4th grade class or something, and we had to do you prefer like beach or mountains or something? I think I was like one of the only ones who said mountains. And everybody was like, you're weird.
No, I think you're right.
I mean, weird is separate.
I also like this idea that how Absent-Minded Raven has put in here about like sort of dousing someone with it being kind of as bad as wearing it as a perfume.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do always wonder because with potions, it seems to be implied that you have to swallow and consume them.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually quite interesting that there's not more around stuff you just inhale.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so true.
Or what about topical?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just slap it on somebody's skin.
Potion that you slather on your scalp.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that literally where Harry's money comes from?
Yeah, but but is it a potion that you drink, or is it a potion that you put on your body? That's the question.
I think it's something that you put on your hair is the way that Hermione makes it sound.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I would assume, but it's never very clear. I suppose.
It is not. She says it's a lot of trouble, which makes me always think that it's not just a quick swig.
Yeah,
that's true.
Because Hermione at least grew up Muggle-born, so it's not like she's a wizard who's like even a quick swig of something can be arduous because it's the norm.
Right. No, I definitely think like doing I don't know. I feel like doing an Amortentia perfume, if it's just like you're basically wearing a perfume of Amortentia, then it would be, I guess, I don't know that it would necessarily have like a weird effect though, because people would just think that you smelled good. They wouldn't necessarily think like, oh, I have to be with this person because they smell so good. It would just be like, oh, they smell like the things that I like. Or like, you smell really good today. You
don't think it'd be a straight up like Ocean's 13 situation where he puts on that the perfume that ends up as an aphrodisiac and instantly that woman is attracted to him?
Yeah, no. I don't think it would be like that because they all smell the potion and they don't like immediately become attracted to the cauldron or the person next to them.
But they do all move nearer to it, don't they? There's a whole like they all move towards it.
Yeah, but that could be.
I also move towards the ocean when I smell it. Or banana chocolate chip bread.
I think it would potentially mean you're more likely to spend time with that person.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Manipulation through smell. But like, isn't that just the same as regular perfume at that point?
Yeah, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to have the same effect as a regular perfume that you also enjoy the smell, like that someone else also enjoys the smell of.
Mm. Yeah, totes.
But it is interesting because like smells can have such a strong reaction. Like there's a perfume that was really popular in like the early 10s. I think it was from one of those weird clothing chains where it was always dark inside. Do you know which one I mean?
Nice. Abercrombie and Fitch.
I
mean, we're saying American brands, but
yeah, no, I think it was an American brand. To be fair,
it's got to be Abercrombie.
Anyway. Yeah, Abercrombie, yes. So their perfume for a while was everywhere, and it was a really like strong smelling perfume, and you could just pick it up. And I don't know, potentially also the people who used it seemed to shower in it. I don't know, they just always smelled really strongly. So I have a really averse reaction to that because even if now every once in a while, you very rarely smell it nowadays, but if it happens, I'm just like, oof, I need to like very quickly walk away.
Yeah, the Hollister or the Abercrombie and Fitch, and then
Axe.
Others, obviously the classic Axe body spray. Anybody around middle school boys.
I was just about to say anybody who's a middle school boy in the aughts knows the smell of Axe body spray and is revolted by it. Especially if you were shoved in a locker and then that locker was filled with Axe body spray by bullies.
Ugh.
Or if you were on a school trip and the guys decided to have an Axe body spray fight and just empty all their canisters.
But Sierra, that's the only way you can have a real Axe fight.
Yeah,
you can't do it with axes.
Oh, teenagers are just fun, aren't they?
Yeah,
that's why I'm a high school teacher. Yeah, it's cool. It's fun. Here, Yay.
Well, you currently have summer holidays, so there's that.
I am living my life as a wonderfully free individual. I love my school. Don't fire me. Anyways, so thank you for the comment, Absent-Minded Raven. If you guys would like to comment, please do. We love discussing, especially newbies' comments. And we'd love to hear what everybody think that they would smell for Amortentia. So go into the comments on this episode and do that. Tell us what you would smell.
We'll somehow use it against you, apparently.
God, we're not very positive today.
Sierra's down in the dumps. Sierra down in the dump day.
I'm fighting a toddler, so it's a whole thing. There's a whole vibe going on here, unseen, under the surface.
Under the surface. That's a lawsuit. Sorry, Disney. Speaking of smells, dragon dung is constantly used in the Wizarding World. Let's get to the dragons.
I was wondering how you were going to transition from smell. Oh, well done.
Hagrid is constantly using dragon dung, I feel like.
Yeah. So Sierra, who kindly started this doc, thought rightfully so that we should maybe start with answering the question, but what are dragons?
Yes. I have seen many things on the internet, but then again, I am a nerd, about people being upset at dragons in pop culture not actually being dragons. So I thought to begin, we'd go over the most classic discrepancy, which is dragons versus wyverns. Dragons have 4 legs and 2 wings. Wyverns have 2 wings that they use as arms and then 2 back legs. So that's the biggest difference between dragons and wyverns. Also, typically speaking, if you're going to compare the two, dragons are usually larger, they're usually more intelligent, potentially sentient, or can have speech or telepathic speech or something like that, whereas wyverns are more of a beast than a being. So that is the kind of big, like, bottom line. And we'll go into also other types of, like, dragon related creatures as well, because you see a lot of those through lots of different pop cultures and things. But yeah, dragons versus wyverns is like the biggest mix up, and I see all the time people being like, that's not a dragon. So I thought we'd start with that.
So it's easy to remember dragons as insects because they have 6 limbs.
Yes, indeed.
I love it.
Dragons are insects. Fun fact, George R.R. Martin recently kind of reignited this whole huge nerd debate, because in A Song of Ice and Fire / Game of Thrones / House of Dragons, the dragons in Westeros and in R.R. Martin's world are wyverns for sure in terms of that classic definition. But in Martin's world, he calls them dragons. So there's a big quote that he put on his website called Not a Blog. He says, dragons do exist in the world of Westeros. However, and then parentheses, wyverns too down in Sotheros. So my own heralds did not have that excuse. Ergo, in my books, the Targaryen sigil has 2 legs, as it should. Because Martin decided, I'm not doing a 6-limbed animal, basically because of what Aurelia said, because those are insects, because no mammal has ever evolved to have 6 limbs. Nothing has 2 wings and 4 appendages.
Arguably, dragons are definitely not mammals anyway, because
reptiles, giant reptiles. My apologies. Mammals was the wrong word there.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm a fool, and you shouldn't have had me on this podcast. Goodbye.
I was going to say, I paid half attention in biology. That's why I know insects have 6 limbs.
My wife is a biologist. It's fine. It's cool. I used to study leatherback sea turtles. It's cool. Anyways,
which are
Reptiles. Reptiles is the word.
job.
So Martin says... So Martin says, why would any Westerosi ever put 4 legs on a dragon when they could look at the real thing and could count their limbs? My wyverns have 2 legs as well. They differ from the dragons of my world, chiefly in size, coloration, and the inability to breathe fire. Parentheses, it should be stressed that while the Targaryen sigil has the proper number of legs, 2, it is not exactly anatomically correct. The wings are way too small compared to the body, and of course, no dragon has 3 heads. That's purely symbolic. So on and so on. Moving down the line, it says, Game of Thrones gave us the correct 2-legged sigils for the first 4 seasons of the Targaryens and most of the 5th. But when Daenerys' fleet goes into view, all the sails showed a 4-legged dragon. Someone got sloppy, I guess, or someone opened a book on heraldry and read just enough to muck it all up. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. A couple of years on, House of Dragons decided the heraldry should be consistent with Game of Thrones, but they went with the bad sigil rather than the good one. That sound you heard was me screaming, no, no, no! Those damned extra legs have even wormed their way onto the covers of my books over my strenuous objections.
That's
so
awful.
I know.
Like, you're the author and you're saying, no, my dragons have 2. This is what they are. This is what they're called. There are 2 limbs. And then on the cover of your books, they're putting 4. That's so rough.
Yeah.
Should get ultimate, veto card on the cover of his book?
I don't think he gets that deal
no.
anymore. When they do cross promotions for books and stuff, when they have you know how sometimes it'll be now becoming a major motion picture, and the cover art for a book will be, unfortunately, the cover for the TV show or the movie, and then purists stop buying the book, but the newbies start buying that one, so they think it's successful. That's when he doesn't get control.
That's still not cool.
No, I know, it's awful. Anyways, that's all to say that even when, Sierra is right about the definition of wyverns have 4 limbs and dragons have 6, but in Martin's world, you still have a more classic looking dragon. But it does not have the 4 legs like a dinosaur with wings. Instead, it's just got the 2 and 2.
Yeah. And as we'll see, there are a couple other circumstances where the people in the world that we're talking about mistake wyverns for dragons and therefore call them dragons, even though there is a distinction between the 2, which I thought was kind of interesting. So it's there are dragons and there are, whatever it is, wyverns or forktails or whatever the case may be, but they, whoever the villagers are who see the thing go, oh, dragon, even though it's not.
It kind of reminds me of the confusion between alligators and crocodiles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Both exist, but people automatically just assume that that they're one, or that they're the same, or that they're interchangeable words.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And then you throw caimans into the mix, and it becomes a whole mess around.
Yeah, for real.
But I'm still a bit confused now. I don't care about Game of Thrones or anything, but isn't he basically saying his dragons are wyverns and he just wants to call them dragons?
Yep.
Correct.
Okay.
At least he knows. At least he knows he's making that choice. But yeah, I mean, yeah.
It's a choice.
It's a choice. I would venture to say, though, most dragons in film and TV are wyverns, at least maybe up until pretty recently. That might not be the case, but I'm pretty sure over the majority of things, they tend to do wyverns. I don't know if that's we want to save money and only animate 2 legs instead of 4, or just a choice, or people don't know the difference.
Do you think someone in the animation department is those extra 2 legs are killing us, we need to cut them?
Yes, I do.
They make
100%.
wild choices when it comes to CGI. You're going to CGI an apartment, a room that looks like an apartment, but then I like make futuristic looking handheld weapons. I don't know. Marvel looking at you, but that's fine. I don't. Choices regarding CG are wild to me.
Sort of CG arguing over a single wrinkle. So an entire leg, I believe it.
Yeah.
Listen, Smaug is drawn in The Hobbit, like on the map, with 4 legs and 2 wings, but they still animated Smaug to be a wyvern.
I have a mention of this right now. So
great.
Speaking of exceptions to the rule, or exceptions to the most dragons are actually wyverns, Kilgara in Merlin is a great dragon. And like in the TV show Merlin, he is a dragon and he looks like a dragon, and they did a good job. In the flashbacks in Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, Smaug is a dragon. He has 4 legs and he has 2 wings. He is a dragon. But once we see him in Desolation of Smaug, they turned him into a wyvern to make him more worm-like and slithery. Thank you, Bendy Snoop Crumperfork, for being very convincing, slithering around on the floor. Then they felt they needed to change the visual to match you. So that's actually what happened. Basically, they were like, we need him to be more snake-like, and also Benedict Cumberbatch was too good at the animating of being all slithery-like, and they were like, great, he's a wyvern now.
Yep.
It's interesting that you know, as a human moving around, he was like, no, I'll just go with 2 limbs.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he has 4 limbs, but that's the thing, is he didn't have 4 limbs, and like, you know, they basically wanted those 4 limbs. So that's those are some exceptions, but also not exceptions because they mucked it up.
Hey, but you got a whole 3rd Hobbit movie where they were just fighting for 3 hours.
Shut your face, Aurelia. I was just talking to people yesterday about how awful that 3rd movie is.
Do you know what? I was in New Zealand watching it. I was like, oh my God, it's so cool. I'm in New Zealand to watch this movie. And they showed, like, the best part of the whole thing was a 10-minute video they only showed in New Zealand before the film started, of all the actors and all the crew, like, thanking people in New Zealand for being so nice. And then the actual movie, I was like, oh, okay.
I wish we'd been meaner.
This is pretty boring.
They took 5 pages of a children's book where the main character's unconscious for most of it and was like, you know what? let's animate the whole thing. That is when nobody was concerned about a CGI budget, because they CGI'd the entire movie.
Right.
Yeah, Peter Jackson has too much power.
You know, one of the things that I found interesting in Dungeons and Dragons is that it's specifically separate between dragons and wyverns. Mm-hmm. Like, there's entirely completely different stat blocks. And similar to in other situations, wyverns are confused as dragons even by the people in the world, but there's a clear distinction for the dungeon masters or the game master, and obviously when you're playing there's a whole bunch, but there's definitely dragons in D&D. I mean, heck, it's in the name.
Could you imagine they would be called Dungeons and Dragons and it actually turned out to be Dungeons and Wyverns?
The internet would riot.
It's like DMW.
It's really just Sellers and Wyverns. It's the CW.
There, we went there.
Yeah, so there's, I mean, besides dragons and wyverns, there's also a number of other common dragon-type creatures who pop up amongst the lore and myth of various locations over time, and almost everywhere has some sort of
dragon lore,
myth, dragon lore of some kind. So I just kind of went through a little bit of the base, like the main, most common, I guess, categories and kind of where they're from. So dragons, the lore originated in Europe, we've got worms. So those have no wings, no legs, and they have a long body. They also can be considered the oldest of dragons. In some lore, any dragon that we see kind of originated, like their not necessarily direct descendants, but kind of come from worms. Also, they're usually known as just themselves being very, very, very old. It is the closest to a snake that you'd see in the dragon type families, and they're Old Germanic or Old Norse in origin. These are similar to but different from a lindworm, which still has no wings, but it has 2 front legs, still has a long body. Also Old Germanic or even Proto-Germanic, most are kind of come from like Norse or Norwegian tales. You can think of like Nidhogg, the quote, quote, dragon who gnaws at the tree of the roots of the world tree Yggdrasil, in Norse mythology. So that's a lindworm. And then the next one we would have would be a drake.
Wow. I'm gonna do my stuff. I'm so sorry. So sorry.
Sure.
Go on.
It has 4 legs, but no wings. They're smaller than dragons. They've got shorter bodies. They're more like a lizard than a snake. And then they've got Latin origins, like ancient Greek. Then you also have knuckers, which are interesting. They are long and thin, like a lindworm or a worm, but they have 4 legs and 2 wings. They are traditionally a water dragon, most famous of which is actually in Lyminster in Sussex. They would, because I guess there's like knucker holes, which are similar to wells, and the legends would be that they would live in there. And they would come out of the knucker holes, and that's what they were called. So, yeah. And then you have the wyverns. So these were 14th century Middle English, and 2 wings, 2 back legs, short bodies, long tails, closely related to cockatrices and basilisks in some myth, in that they guard hidden treasures and sacred places. And then cockatrices being serpent and a rooster combination. 2 legs, 2 wings, rooster head. Can spit poison or breathe fire. And basilisks being large serpents, no limbs, but a deadly petrifying gaze and venom. So think basilisk in Harry Potter.
I cannot believe that we haven't gotten some movie that does the comedic bit of a cockatrice feeling like it's really not that scary because it's got a rooster head and then absolutely demolishing everything around it.
They're still huge.
I was going to say, you'd have to have a fight between a cockatrice and a basilisk, and the basilisk would instantly die when the cockatrice just like
cocks its head. And
I actually battled one of a cockatrice in a D&D campaign last year, and that thing was mean.
Yeah.
Mean.
And the final one for dragons from Europe is dragons themselves. As we said, 4 legs, 2 wings, lizard-leaning features rather than snake-like, with shorter bodies and tails. Like I was saying, like dragons appear in myth throughout almost every region on Earth. Some are gods, some are fearsome beasts, some help royalty, depending on kind of where the origin of the myth came from. But no matter if they're friend or foe or whatever, they're always, always very well respected, either because you should fear them or just respect them. So that is the one kind of commonality throughout everything.
So the town I grew up in Germany has its own like little dragon fairy tale, because the town where I grew up in is like at the bottom of a volcano. It's long been extinct, but at some point obviously it was an active volcano, and there was a tale of basically that being a lindworm. So, people didn't know what was going
cool.
on. So obviously, it's a fire-spitting dragon. And there's a fairy tale of the town, like the villagers would go up and feed the dragon, like do offerings. And basically it just would feed the daughters of the town. Like
nice.
Some people would just be selected, typical fairy tale stuff. Until a knight came and battled the dragon. And then obviously got to marry the girl that was on offer.
The about to be melted by lava girl.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's there's a whole like dragon tale from of the dragon from the Limburg, which is what the volcano is called.
That's really cool that you have your own.
That's really neat.
Your own lore. Very, very cool.
I want my own dragon lore.
Right?
I mean, you could just come up with it.
This is true. Yeah, so then, let's see. Dragons from Asia. There are two kind of, besides any sort of iteration of ones already specified. These are kind of the more unique ones. So the lung dragon, which is very typical Chinese dragon, 4 legs, no wings, long body. They still can fly. So the Chinese dragon, which represents yang, like yin and yang, almost always has an anthropomorphic face with a beard. And it's made up of 9 animals: head of a camel, scales of a carp, horns of a giant stag, eyes of a hare, ears of a bull, neck of a snake, belly of a clam, paws of a tiger, and claws of an eagle. Which I did not, that makes sense. Like,
yeah, when you put it all together.
That makes sense, like, when you think about it. But I did not realize before kind of doing this research that those were all of the animals.
Neck of a snake is such an interesting signifier.
Which is very interesting. So,
also, belly of a clam? Fascinating.
It's also interesting that it's 9, because it's not a number you often encounter.
Right.
Unless you're a big Beatles fan.
Number 9. Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Then another popular one is nagas, which are half human, half cobra. This is Indian origin. And yes, this is where Nagini comes from, a female serpent princess. They were mythical semi-divine beings who could assume wholly human or wholly serpentine forms. But in art, in order to distinguish what they were depicting, they were portrayed with serpent bodies and human heads, or serpents with many heads. So that would be the clue that what you were looking at was not just a serpent or just a human, but was this a naga.
I've often seen them depicted similar to what you would think Medusa could look like.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Currently where I live here in England, there's a manor house. They're everywhere here. But they're nearby in like a park, and over the summer they always do something for like entertaining children. And this summer they're doing mythical beasts. And so I think local artists have made like just big drawings of different like creatures, and then also like children from around here from the schools had made little pictures of different beings that they thought up in their heads. There's lots of dragons, obviously, and there's also Medusa. So you just walk through the forest, and there's just like, and they're quite big, and you just like walk around the corner, and there's like this big fiery red dragon, and then you walk around the next corner, and there's this like really menacing looking Medusa just staring at you. Like the first time I walked around, it's like, what? Oh, okay. This is just a picture.
That's so interesting. Yeah, we that's really interesting. The like local museum here is having a whole thing this summer on mythical creatures as well, actually. I haven't gone yet since the like showcase has been open, but we'll probably go in the next couple weeks, so We'll see how that compares, and if there's anything as terrifying as rounding a corner and seeing a giant Medusa.
I was gonna say, I'm just slightly worried that I got scared, and I was like, if there's like, there's like 4, 5, 6-year-olds running around here.
Yeah. I don't know, though. I mean, Kenzie's not afraid of too many things. She doesn't like know to be afraid of anything yet. So, she just kind of like runs around and sees things and is like, what's that? What are they doing? Why is that happening? And then if we're like watching Supernatural or something, I'll be like, don't watch this part. And then she'll watch it anyway and be like, why did that doggy do that? And I'm like, that's not a dog. She just is like, oh, okay. And then it went away. And I'm like, yes, it went away. It didn't die very bloody. It's fine. It just went away.
Yep.
You got it, girl. So I feel like maybe we still haven't reached the things are scary part, except for when it's convenient to delay bedtime. And then the top of the dresser is scary. But if I put the things on the ground, it's fine. Mm-hmm. So that's where we're at. So maybe, hopefully, these 4-year-olds running around and seeing Medusa are just like, ooh, snakes. There's like 2 more kind of main categories of dragon. We'll just say dragon as a generic category. So from Oceania, you've got sea serpents. So we'll caveat on that. While all sea serpents can't trace their lineage back to Oceania, there's a huge tradition of myth regarding sea serpents in that region. So that's why I put it in this category, which is understandable because they're surrounded by water and reliant on sailing. And, that's very common. So sea serpents sometimes have 2 limbs, but most often have none, and are very much serpent-like. Occasionally, when they do have the 2 limbs, they're usually webbed, something to help them get around in the water easier. So that's kind of that category. And then the last one would be dragon from Africa/Americas. So that would be an amphithere. So they have 2 wings, no legs, and a long tail. So kind of like a worm with legs. A worm with wings. Originally, the myth began in Egypt and North Africa, but during the slave trade came to America and is now considered an American-type dragon because the myth was so heavily
prevalent
and like leaned into when it got here. So that's kind of like the main categories, and their wings or no wings or legs or no legs situations.
What's fascinating about all of this is there's always been kind of a big question of like, why does basically every or many cultures around the world have myths about dragons? Like, and I think even like History Channel, which is not a real History Channel, did like a whole thing about dragons and why they could be real because of all the myths and et cetera, et cetera. But the prevailing theory is that like dinosaurs did exist and were everywhere and were dug up in medieval times and pre-medieval times and all sorts of stuff like that. And so many people believe that, like I said, the prevailing theory is that because people were digging up dinosaurs without any realization of what they were, these myths were created around those bones.
Mm-hmm. That would make a lot of sense. Yeah.
And they're closer than they're wrong.
Yeah.
That's very true.
It would also then make sense that in the Oceania area, they didn't necessarily have dragons.
Just sea serpents.
Right. Yeah, but because Australia and especially New Zealand separated the earliest of all the land masses breaking apart. Right. So there's actually no like T-Rexes anywhere found there because
they were off.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they wouldn't have dug up T-Rex bones, for example.
Right. Mm-hmm. They would have just found whatever creatures were living in the ocean, which I'm sure there were plenty terrifying huge, enormous.
Yeah, I mean, whales are big.
The giant, all the giant
Right,
fish,
even
the
just a
giant
whale,
whales.
yeah. And when you have when you just find a skeleton, you don't know how much is like around it. I don't know if anybody's this is a little off topic, but as we are. But I don't know if anybody's seen like people are always saying that T-Rexes look like this, but have you ever seen a penguin skeleton? And then it's like this really thin thing, but it's really poofy on the outside, and so then they have this drawing of a T-Rex, but it's basically like a chick in proportions, like it's so big and poofy. It's so big and poofy and like wee.
Chickens are the last ancestors of T-Rexes, so.
Right. But
so there's,
but yeah, I just the idea that they would have had a lot of like meat and feather and whatever rounding out their bodies and not just relying on this what the skeleton looks like.
Yeah.
And
also like given Oceania's lots of water in the ocean, being in Oceania, it is interesting, like a lot, there's all those tales about giant tentacles and all that sort of stuff, and we know giant squids and exist, but it seems like most likely what they were seeing is like the one tentacle sea serpent is just like whale penises because whales have massive penises and they often will stick them out of the water and they look terrifying.
The more real answer to this is that bonefish exist and they're just like really, really long fish, and they sometimes get washed up on the shore and they just look like giant sea serpents. That's
true. Whale penises are terrifying though.
I was trying to steer us away from that. Anyway.
From dorks? Yes. Dragons and Harry Potter. Tell us all about those, Sierra.
So obviously Harry Potter, we know and see a good number of the different dragons. There are 10 different breeds, not including obviously any interbreeding mixing, which they don't talk about happening too often, but it has been known to happen in the past. But most of the dragons have their own very unique regions and territories, and so you wouldn't come across too much in the way of any like them coming across each other in general. So you have the Antipodean opali. This has origins in New Zealand, and I thought that the fun thing would be their favorite food. So the Antipodean opali's favorite food is sheep, which makes sense for New Zealand.
Yes, it does.
They are non-aggressive to humans unless they're provoked, which is basically the same for any animal. So, they just kind of hang out and they eat their sheep and have a good time.
Listen, Aurelia and I are all about the New Zealand Quidditch teams over in our Quintessential Quidditch Quali League, which is on Patreon. You can find out all about it there. And I am sure at some point the Antipodean Opali's, which is a new team that I've made up, will make their appearance in this league.
Very nice.
Yeah, I mean,
that'd be great.
I mean, the question though with all the New Zealand Quidditch teams to me is, but what is their mascot?
Do you want to give the listeners a little tease as to why that's a big question? Why it's clearly not the dragon, maybe?
See, I forgot what their I can only remember their mascot now.
They're the macaws, right?
What are they called?
And then it's the phoenix. They're the phoenixes.
Yeah. But they're not actually called the phoenixes. Like they're...
No, what are they called? Oh my gosh. Hold on.
I'm sorry, we're very unprepared for this bit.
Apparently...
Very unprepared to talk about the thing that you guys made up out of your own brains.
Well, this is an actual Quidditch team.
That's one of the real Quidditch teams because Sam and I imported two of the J.K.
Rolling
Quidditch teams, and one of them is the New Zealand one.
Okay, so it doesn't make any sense. It kind of goes into fashion with some of Rowling's like research, where you're like, Cho Chang is not like a real name. It's not as bad as that, clearly, but the Mutuhuru macaws, which New Zealand doesn't have macaws, but they're the Mutuhuru macaws. And you guessed it, their mascot is a phoenix.
Yeah, named Sparky.
Which is a North African bird. That is not the same as a macaw.
No.
Okay.
So, yeah, Sam and I made up a whole rivalry between that team and another team that also has a mascot of the phoenix.
The Port Said Phoenixes, which are out of Egypt. And actually, amazing. So every time Port Said Phoenixes play the macaws, they absolutely crush them because they hate the fact that the macaws have a phoenix as their
oh my gosh.
So in this case, instead of having the Antipodean opalies have the Antipodean opali as their mascot, I'm pretty sure it's just a sheep.
Yeah, it's gotta be something very random.
It's just a sheep.
Like cheeseburger.
Yeah, exactly. It's a sheep tied up on a spigot, but still alive.
Oh my god, no! Gosh, moving on from that very upsetting description. Chinese fireball, aka the lion dragon. Their favorite food, pigs and humans.
So similar.
Clearly aggressive to humans.
I hope we see this in the new show, since we were robbed of it in Goblet of Fire.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Instead of showing us 4 dragons for a short period of time, or even because I will give you that they're only seen in the forest and Harry doesn't actually see the other 3 dragons in real life, but we don't even see the little miniatures of them, which I think is really a crime. We see one little wings and we see one little puff of smoke.
Yeah.
I think it probably all comes down to how well lit the TV show is going to be. If they're going to copy the everything's dark and gloomy, then, in a forest you can only see the fire of the dragons.
But we still should see the miniatures.
Yeah, we should still see that. Well, and sure, the fire, but they get up close and they see, Harry sees some of it. But instead of doing that and having little miniatures, we just got a random 10-minute chase destroying the castle.
Yeah.
Hey, that was so important, though.
It was very important for nobody who's witnessing the tasks to see any part of any task.
I mean, excuse me, but have you read the books? What do they see in task 2 and 3?
No, but they do see all of task 1, and the movie was just what if they didn't, though?
Yeah.
What if we screwed them on all accounts?
Clearly, there was something here where they should not see any of the tasks. Yeah. I also like that if you only seen the movies, you must assume that Hogwarts just got half destroyed and then everyone just carried on.
Right.
Whatever.
Every day.
It's fine. It's fine. Another one that Sam hopes we see in the show is common Welsh green. Their favorite food, also sheep. Which
makes sense if you've been to Wales.
Yeah, exactly. So also non-aggressive to humans unless provoked. So, Antipodean opali and common Welsh greens, they would probably be best friends.
Do you think that Rowling did this on purpose to upset the Welsh people? That it's not the common Welsh red, like their flag?
I just assumed it was because Wales is a fairly green, I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
location.
So they made a flag with a red dragon, but there's no red dragon there. It's just a green dragon.
But I think that to me makes sense because in nature, animals tend to blend
I agree that
with
makes
their
sense.
surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
But it is also fantasy, so she could have done anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, but most of these,
a Quidditch team that kind of has a phoenix as a mascot.
And a macaw as the name in New Zealand. It's fine. Okay. Yeah, I see your point.
The next one would be Hebridean black. Their favorite food is deer. They are slightly aggressive to humans, but they are mostly well managed by the McFusty clan, who keeps the Hebridean black population under control, and in their designated non-human populated areas in the Hebrides.
Interesting.
I have nothing to say about the Scottish dragon.
Yeah. McFusty must be made up, right?
It's gotta be McFusty. Yeah. It just sounds funny.
It sounds like the Scottish version of McFly. So I need to see a Back to the Future dragon mix. Time Turners meets riding a dragon instead of a DeLorean.
Oh,
Okay.
Sam.
Interesting.
But also, deer makes sense if you've ever been to Scotland.
Yeah, I was going to say that's another one that does make logical sense. Then we have the Hungarian horntail. Woohoo! Their favorite foods: goats, sheep, and humans. They are the most aggressive species of dragon in this list, particularly to humans, but also to each other. So that is
Which is
fun.
still wild to me that actually this was chosen for the tournament.
Instead of like any of the other.
Yeah, I mean,
Like-
I get that we needed 4 fresh dragons, but you could have just had 2 Chinese fireballs or something. You know, it didn't have to be 4 different breeds that are also different levels of dangerous.
And especially, it seems like it's a bit like, I don't know. It's already weird to kind of import dragons for games. And the Hungarian Horntail, they know that they've got a 14-year-old in there. And so, like, the business selection on, like, win-win, lose-lose. Lose-lose is, like, we take the most aggressive dragon and we put him with a 14-year-old and he dies. That's so much worse than the win-win, which is, like, it goes against Victor Crumb and Victor Crumb wins for a newspaper clipping. So I feel like the Hungarian Horntail was the wrong choice. Also, if we don't get this in the new show, I will be floored. I will just be confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be.
But
really
I don't need the long
bizarre.
castle chase.
The question though is if it actually gets 4 legs or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's a wyvern in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get into that. Yeah. So we'll you know what? This is a good segue. So differences between. So are they actually dragons? Okay, we're gonna go into this right now because you made that point. Fantastic Beasts. The book Fantastic Beasts does not go into depth on limb and body description. They all have wings, so we know that. In the Fantastic Beasts 3 movie, there is a wyvern specifically who transports Newt and the Quinlan after he passes out and all that stuff. In the books, the descriptions that were given for the dragons in the books, for Norbert, there's no clear picture of limbs, but its spiny wings were huge compared to its skinny jet body, and it had a long snout with wide nostrils, stubs of horns, and bulging orange eyes. So we're not clear on how many legs. The first task dragons are mentioned as rearing onto their hind legs and teetering dangerously on its back legs. However, the Hungarian horntail, during the first task, it says, now unprotected by her clawed front legs. All of that makes me think they've got 4.
Yeah, for sure.
Why would you specify hind legs, front legs, if there was only 2? The Gringotts dragon as well mentions both rear legs were chained. So again, makes me think 4 legs, 2 wings. So that's at least 5 types of dragon that we are pretty confident are actual dragons. In the movies, no, they're all wyverns.
CGI strikes again.
So yeah, that will bother me forever. Yeah, so that's fun.
We're stuck on our timeline. What do we do? Chop off some legs. Sounds like a plan.
I would be particularly angry if the only reason the horntail is a wyvern is like, oh, it looks terrible by perching on a roof where it never should be anywhere.
Perching on a roof with 4 legs and 2 wings. Oh, that would be so bad. I wouldn't be 100% surprised though if it was something weird like that.
Mm-hmm.
Movie business is weird.
I don't think it is, because in the studio tour you can do here, They talk actually how they came up with the design for the horntail. And
that's cool.
It started from like sketches and stuff. So I don't think they had figured out yet what they were going to do with it. And they built a model for it as well. So you like at least part of a model.
Mm-hmm.
Neat.
That's pretty cool.
I wish it had had 4 legs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another dragon that we do see a decent amount of, or hear a decent amount of, Norwegian Ridgeback. This is Norbert. Woohoo!
Norberta.
They are not picky about their food. And they will even eat large sea-dwelling creatures. They've been known to even like pick up entire whales. And so they are very aggressive towards humans and others. And others of its kind and other dragons. So very fun.
If we don't see this in the new show, because we did get it in Sorcerer's Stone, but then we never hear about Charlie ever. And we don't hear about Norberta later. But if we don't get this dragon in the new show, it will mean an entire rewrite of Hagrid's plot points in Sorcerer's Stone, and I would boycott.
Yeah, that would be... You, like, cannot leave Norbert out.
It's... The book's 17 chapters, the Sorcerer's Stones, and, like, the entire plot point around how does Quirrell know to get past Fluffy is based upon Norbert being there. So we better see him in the show.
Yeah, for real.
But what if it was a phoenix? Sorry.
I've always wanted to have a pet phoenix, and Dumbledore's like, only one of us can have a phoenix, and makes him send it away.
Yeah, you have to change your last name, then maybe.
First, Slughorn gets to come by to pluck all the feathers off to sell them to Ollivander, and then they ship the phoenix home.
Can't do that. Isn't the whole point that phoenix tail feather wands, the phoenixes give the feathers of their own accord?
At least with Fox, yeah.
Yeah, which has always made me think that there should maybe just be like 5 phoenix feather tail wands, and the rest of them are probably all unicorn hair and dragon heartstring, because phoenixes are super rare.
True.
I hope that most of the wands are just unicorn hair.
And
Quidditch
it's very...
teams have them as mascots, but...
Well, and it's also very unique that Fox gave 2 feathers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, the logic doesn't quite add up. But I think most of the wands we hear about are dragon heartstring and unicorn tail hair.
We'll get into the dragon heartstring later.
Yeah.
Other
dragons, there's a couple more. So we got Peruvian viper tooths. Their favorite food is humans, but they also like goats and cows. They are the smallest and the swiftest breed. So that's...
I'm thinking someone at the committee was like, so dragons that we're getting Peruvian viper tooths, right? And everyone's like, you sure that's a good idea? Let's downgrade that to a horntail. That'll be okay.
Also, I feel like Peruvian viper tooths were the biggest fan of corn syrup and fast food.
Yeah.
It took me a second to register why.
That took me a minute.
I don't have enough coffee.
Are we Leviathaning this one?
Yes.
Sorry, that was another supernatural reference for everybody. Then we've got Romanian longhorns. Their food preference is unknown. However, we do know that it gores its prey with its horn and roasts it before eating. So
nice.
This is the only one that we know of that cooks its food.
Dragon.
Exactly. Yeah. Doesn't just eat it raw and cooks it. Nice. I wonder if there's any sort of glaze, maybe.
Glaze? They dip it in a vat of high fructose corn syrup first. They were also excited about those showing up.
I'm just imagining it like going to different like bodies of water and like dipping and then roasting and seeing what that does.
It really likes going to the where's the Dead Sea? Just flies over, dips it in the salt content, and then brings it up.
Just salt crusted. We then go on a kind of a 180 from that to the Swedish short snout, which has the lowest human body count of all the dragon types, but they also dwell in uninhabited mountainous areas. So circumstance versus personal preference. We're not entirely sure.
So unfair of them to have the Hungarian horntail and then the Swedish short snout. It's like, yeah, most aggressive, absolutely will kill you. And then Swedish short snout for Fleur being like, yeah, it's cool.
Well, and the common Welsh green.
Yeah.
Like, be non-aggressive to humans, like, just kind of hangs out, does its own thing. Then the final one we get is the Ukrainian Iron Belly. This is the Gringotts dragon that we see in Deathly Hallows. They are the largest breed. Their food preferences are also unknown, but they have been known to crush buildings by landing on them. And once there's a depiction of one once carrying off an entire sailing vessel.
That's amazing.
So, yeah.
Oh, man. So if they decided to omit this from season 10 of the new show, I won't boycott, because I'll be too invested in the fact that we're so close to being at the end of the new Harry Potter show.
Wait, do you think that's going to be season 10 and not season 7?
Yes, because they're doing 10 seasons. They said that it seems like what they're going to do is seasons 1, 2, and 3 is going to be books 1, 2, and 3, and then each of the next books get 2 seasons each.
Oh.
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense, but
I can get behind that, I suppose.
Yeah, but also they also booked Game of Thrones for 10 seasons and then only did 8, so who knows?
And started cutting.
It must be really hardcore for all those, because Harry Potter has so many characters, for all those actors that are only needed every once in a while. It'll be a scheduling nightmare.
That's
for
so
real.
True. There's probably going to be a bunch of recasting for those things.
Ugh, don't say that. I hate that.
Well, I'm talking the ones, we see a glimpse of in season, like Daedalus Diggle. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Charlie Weasley.
Poor Charlie.
Ugh. Anyways, if they omit the Ukrainian Iron Billy, I will be upset. Not quite the burrow is burring down for no reason upset, but I'll be upset.
No, I'd be more upset about that, because how are they leaving Gringotts then?
Just fierce willpower. Ron's Patronus is actually a lion, and he turns into it himself. He turns into right at that moment, he drinks the new dew that nobody's touched and becomes an animagus.
Okay. Yeah, cool.
Perfect.
That definitely is not a process that takes at least a month.
That's what I'm saying. It happens right then.
Yep.
The last step happens right at the bottom of Gringotts.
He was not talking for the whole time he was not with Harry and Hermione, because he had that mandrake leaf under his tongue.
No, you can talk with a leaf in your mouth. It's just awful garbage garbledness.
Oh, is Steve Close writing the screenplay? I mean,
Irvin will love that joke.
So I thought the next thing would be just to talk about just the general outlook on dragons in canon. I think, to most, dragons are terrifying. They need to be well looked after by the wizarding population to keep them from Muggle view for the most part. And then once a dragon goes rogue and starts causing issues, they do tend to be hunted and driven back fiercely, which causes huge drops in the population and almost causes extinction, like in the case of the Peruvian Vipertooth. There are some, Charlie and company are helping to study and care for dragons. I'm assuming he's most likely at the world's most important dragon reservation in the Romanian longhorn's natural habitat, because he's in Romania. And they have an aggressive breeding program for the dragons because they've been hunted for their horns, which are a valuable potion ingredient and a Class B tradable material.
Okay, but what is Charlie Weasley doing to stop Ollivander from ripping out their heartstrings? Or is he slapping Dumbledore for finding out the 12 uses of dragon's blood? Or is Charlie in on it, where he's killing dragons and sending heartstrings because he wants to make more money because he grew up poor? Or is he drawing, once he subdues a dragon, is he drawing their blood from them and then selling that? Or like, where does all the dragon dung come from? Does he sell that to Hagrid? And the sizzling dragon bogies that are used for potion ingredients too. Like, is that ethically sourced? Or like with spider silk where you pin the spider down and then you just draw all the silk out of it? Or do you just kill it and open it up and get all the bogies?
See, this is another one where I think maths is the core of the problem, where, you know, we all know rolling doesn't do numbers. I would assume you could use a dead dragon's heart to produce those heartstrings, because, I mean, once they're in the wood, they're, you know, not alive anymore anyway.
Right.
So I guess once a dragon dies, you could just use that. But also the number of overall dragons that seem to still exist doesn't necessarily seem to match how much wizards are using dragon ingredients.
Right.
Yeah.
I would like to think that basically once a dragon dies, they like that's at the point where they use all of the parts and, you know, use the bogies and harvest
it's not
everything.
Like they have licenses saying
and like
that they're
there's like a
organ donors.
stockpile of that, but you have to also imagine, I mean, when they are doing population hunting or when they're like driving back dragons because they become too aggressive towards humans, I'm sure that, and then also like with the Romanian longhorns, like they're being hunted specifically for it, which is like, you know, rhinos being hunted. You have to just imagine there's some of both basically happening where like, yeah, they're doing it right sometimes.
And I'm sure they're doing it right for the options that are easy. Like you could probably ethically source dragon blood, like, but the hearts and horns, that's a separate thing.
It you know, we see in the real world, if you have something that has a valuable bit to it, whether it's superstition or not, like rhino horns or ivory off of elephant tusks, like the fact that Ollivander needs to sell dragon heartstring wands because he finds them good, even if you can get that ethical source, like, oh yeah, Charlie Weasley sends me dragon heartstrings when his dragons naturally die. You are always, it is always going to create a poaching problem where people are like, great, well, I can sell this commodity. I just have to kill a dragon, which is like, yeah, of course it's harder than it sounds, but it's still bad. I still hate it. Like, can we just use dragon scales? Unicorn hair seems like a much better thing. It gets, like, Hagrid gets it tangled all the time.
Right.
In the woods. Just get that. Let's stop using dragon heartstrings. This is now a pro stop dragon heartstrings podcast.
Yeah. We need more rights for dragons.
Mm-hmm. Or like, you know, to start using alternative things like Fleur's Hazavila hair.
Yeah, and then Ollivander gets all, like, bent out of shape about it, though. He's like, I always found them to be temperamental, but if it works for you, great.
Right, but I feel like we need to start experimenting.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the reality is Ollivander is just using 3 ingredients when you could potentially just use different ingredients.
Yeah, where the Kelpie hairs.
Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah.
That'd be
or the
interesting.
Grindylow nails.
Well, is he doing that out of like supply and demand, like, or is that maybe his preferred material?
It's his preferred
like
material.
His preference.
Yeah, it's not like stated directly like that, but that's the subtext of him, is that like he's the best wand maker, and that he basically uses just the 3 materials that he thinks are the least temperamental.
Yeah, so that's like the main kind of view, like outlook on dragon. I mean, you have the others like Hagrid, who love any large beast, no matter how wildly inappropriate they are as a pet. His views are definitely considered bonkers amongst everybody. I am thinking maybe he should have gotten a common Welsh green or an Antipodean opali egg instead of Norwegian Ridgeback egg. Potentially that would cause slightly less issues. Potentially.
What? How dare you use logic?
I mean, part of that is clearly it's hard enough to get to any dragon egg, so he couldn't, choose.
Be picky.
This is the one that, this was the one that...
This is the one that showed up on the black market that Voldemort managed to have Quirrell get,
Yeah. But then also, I like Hermione's, you live in a wooden hut, so I think 0 dragons is the exact right amount of dragons for Harry. And they would always outgrow that hut anyway. Like, at some point you would have, you can't keep it in a hut. And then what? Dumbledore's just not going to see that?
Not to be Irvin's harbinger of Hagrid hatred, but Hagrid is not the most forward-thinking individual.
No.
Boom.
Ooh, dragon.
It's the same. We see the same thing happen with Grob.
And Aragog.
He's like, yeah, I'll just bring my half-brother into the forest where other, beasts are already living and beings are living, and they might object, but who cares? I want this to happen.
Yeah, we sadly only get to see 3 dragons in the films. We see Norbert, the Norwegian Ridgeback. We see the Hungarian Horntail during the Triwizard Tournament. And we see the Ukrainian Ironbelly and Gringotts. They're all so spaced out that it's really difficult to compare them with each other, but then also between the movie depictions and the book depictions. And also the Ukrainian Ironbelly that we see has been so mistreated that it is really difficult to say if it's accurate to the description that we get in the Fantastic Beasts book. So kind of comparing the two between movies and book depiction, besides the fact that it clearly goes from dragons to wyverns, we don't get too much on the accuracy of everything. Fairly okay, but
I feel like we get a really good sense with the Horntail that of the danger and awfulness that is presented when facing a dragon one-on-one. I think the Goblet of Fire movie does that fine, even though I don't love the methods of it. But you don't get this sense of danger with Norbert at all. Like the fact that Ron gets bit and is in the hospital wing for a week dealing with this poison is not apparent. And also the Ukrainian Ironbelly, because we don't get that much lore around Gringotts period in the movies, you don't really get the sense of this dragon is so mistreated and must be incredibly powerful because it just clawed its way out of a hugely magical, fortified, protected fortress.
Right.
So you just kind of see a dragon crawling out, which is neat in itself. But in the books, there's this feeling of power behind the dragon that I feel you don't get. And I really hope when they do this new show that they accomplish all of that. And also they don't skimp on the budget, that we get dragons, not wyverns, and that we get more than a glimpse of each of the dragons that the other Triwizard champions are facing.
That would be great.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Maybe show from an audience perspective instead of Harry's perspective, just because you're hearing commentary enough that you can probably put together something, even if it's in a semi-montage form of it goes Harry's in the tent listening, and then it shows a little glimpse of Crumb dodging or something like that.
And instead of Ron giving Harry a run by, you could just show it because this is visual media. So
that's the one thing I hope the show does is go outside Harry's POV more often than we get in the books.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is also another example of ring theory where we see dragons in books 1, 4, and 7. So the outer ring.
No. Great sizzling dragon bogies are mentioned by Filch when he has to clean up and is really pissed that Harry made the castle dirtier in Chamber of Secrets.
But do we see a dragon, Sam?
No.
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 I mean, by that logic, Merlin appears a lot.
All right, fair enough. Ring theory wins again. Dear listeners, we all love and appreciate dragons, and we hope you do too. And so now we are going to delve into a great deal of many other dragon franchises that we hope that you read, watch, listen to, or consume in some way, shape, or form. Not an actual dragon, but the content that includes it. So we'll be starting with one of the more in the zeitgeist, well, especially if you went back 6 years. But there's another show going on at the moment that isn't as big. We're going to talk about dragons in A Song of Ice and Fire / Game of Thrones / House of Dragons, which, to be fair, I have not seen House of Dragons, so we're really just talking about A Song of Fire and Ice. Which, for those of you who are like, why does he keep saying that? That's the actual name of the series. Game of Thrones is the name of the first book and the name of the TV series, but the book series is A Song of Fire and Ice. So as I mentioned before, Martin was bothered that no reptiles have ever evolved to have 2 wings and 4 limbs or 6 appendages. Those are insects, as Aureo pointed out. So his dragons are the same amount of limbs as a wyvern, but the dragons are much bigger, much more traditionally dragon-looking, and breathe fire. There are indeed riders. People ride these dragons, but basically just the Targaryens. Unless the House of Dragons is showing otherwise, I don't know. Similarities to Harry Potter would be, listen, if this dragon has enough space on food, like if it is free and able to roam around and is not killed, it will not stop growing. It can get a lot bigger than the Iron Belly or the Horntail. In some other franchises, color has bearing on the character. That is not true here. Dragons in this world emanate an intense heat from their skin. So on like really cold nights, you'll see the dragon looks like it's steaming, essentially. And if they're cut, like their blood produces smoke. The dragons in this world are theorized to change sex as nature needs, kind of like the frogs in Jurassic Park. And it's, quote, theorized to be as changeable as flame itself, or something like along those lines. So dragons seem a little bit more intelligent than what we get in Harry Potter. They're not like wild animals. They have a bit more of a connection and a thought process, but they're not straight up like human intelligence levels like you get with like the inheritance cycle or Dragonlance. And they're not quite toothless either, where there seems to be a lot more thought process, but there's something more than just like wild, eat, forage, food. The outlook on dragons in A Song of Ice and Fire is basically that they are the harbingers of control if you're the Targaryens, or oppression if you're everybody else. And differences between the shows and the books. So there's so much between the show and the book for Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire. It's hard to cover, but Game of Thrones, the show, is basically seems to have gotten the feel for the dragons down, which is really great because I that's a good adaptation for me, is when you get the feel of it down rather than its literal nature. And are they actually dragons? George R.R. Martin, as explained earlier, would tell you 100% yes, they're dragons. As Aurelia said, is he just calling wyverns dragons and being like, cool? Yeah.
Yes, he is. Yeah, another pretty popular but more kind of young reader would be How to Train Your Dragon. Obviously, most people know about the movies and maybe even some of the TV shows, but it is was originally based on a book series by Cressida Cowell, and it's a pretty well done adaptation to the movies. Obviously, the movies are different. I haven't read all of the How to Train Your Dragon books. I think my brother did. I've read a couple of them. They're just, it's focusing on different things, and it's just, I mean, it's obviously a book medium versus TV versus for movie. I personally...
Isn't there also a TV show?
There are multiple TV shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a whole, there's a huge, basically, franchise of How to Train Your Dragon. There's a couple of branch-off TV shows, not all of them including Hiccup. There's one called Dragons Rescue Riders, which is on Netflix, and... my daughter watched every single episode a bajillion times for a while there, which it was pretty cool. And you got to see a lot of different types of dragons in there. And I, for one, absolutely love the original How to Train Your Dragon movie. The other ones are good as well, but the first one just is always just so I just thought it was pretty amazing at the time when I first saw it, and then just it's my style of sass. So I'm very into we need her to like us type of vibe. There are at least 48 types of dragon that I could find. Potentially, when you branch out into the whole franchise, there's 85 types of dragon, which is insane. And that's mainly because instead of just saying like a green dragon, and then there's kind of variations in that, not huge variations. It's like every single one has its own name, own thing that it does, own type. They are split into 7 main classes. Stoker class, hot-headed fire breathers. So that's like the monstrous nightmare, which if you've seen the movies or anything, I'm gonna like mention the specific like main character dragons. So Hook Fang, which is Snotlout's dragon, that's a monstrous nightmare. That's Stoker class. And there's the Boulder class. So those are very tough, earth associated. They eat rocks. Main one would be a Gronkle. So that's Meat Lug, which is Fish Legs dragon, the really short, steady one. Then there's a Tracker class, which the Tracker class was actually created because of the domestication of dragons that we see in the first How to Train Your Dragon movie. It used to be the Fear class, but now they're no longer afraid of dragons. And so they usually have an acute sense of smell or taste, which leads them to being able to track. This is seen as like the Deadly Natter, which is like Stormflight, Astrid's dragon, or Rumblehorn's like Skullcrusher, son of Eret's dragon. Which I believe he's in the second one. And then there's the Sharp class. They're vain and prideful, and they have very sharp body parts, usually talons or spikes. So this can be seen like the Stormcutter, which one example is Cloud Jumper, which is Volka's dragon. I promise no spoilers, so I won't explain who Volka is. But you can watch the multiple sequels. Then there's the Tidal class. Those live in or near the ocean. They're very large size. There's not a main character of those, but some categories would be like a Scaldron or a Shellfire. Like I said, they all have their own individual names. And then there's Mystery class. So those are usually stealthy, sneaky, the most feared. It's usually temporary that dragons are put into this class until like more is learned about them. But one example of that would be the hideous Zippleback, which is the dragon Barf and Belch that Rough Nut and Tough Nut jointly ride. It has the two heads. And then there's the Strike class. That's the final. Blazing speed, vice-like jaw strength, and extreme intelligence. So Toothless is a Night Fury. He falls into this category of the Strike class.
I also found when I did some research that the way that the dragons get animated in the movies is they basically copied a lot of cat-like behavior. So that's why a lot of the movements of how you see the dragons in those movies is very reminiscent of cats.
You know, dragons and cats have very similar personalities.
Because we humans have made it so.
Well, it's very true because a lot of the times they are very similar across different like media.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I actually left this part out, but later on in Witcher, there's actually a whole lore thing about how cats and dragons are the only creatures who can like absorb magic, basically. So I think that's kind of funny. Another example of cats and dragons.
Yeah. And if you think about it in How to Train Your Dragon, because the dragons get domesticated almost, and cats have domesticated themselves twice. So
very true.
Yeah, comparing to what we see in Harry Potter, dragons in How to Train Your Dragon obviously domesticated. And do you want to take over this part, Aurelia?
Yeah. And I think one of the key differences here is that this is another one of the different types of dragon media where we see that we have dragon riders, which is a sort of common theme that you get. So in this one, there's an interaction between humans and dragons rather than what we see in Harry Potter, where I think dragons are more feared for the most part of it, and we're definitely not sure about the, intelligence. So I'm not saying that the dragons we see in Harry Potter are not intelligent, but there's not like talking dragons that you interact with or have a mind connection or that sort of stuff, like we have here. And then, are they actually dragons, Sierra?
For the most part. They are actually dragons. I will admit I did not look at all 85 depictions to determine if that was accurate, but I did look at it enough that I did find a few exceptions. There's a couple that have more than 4 legs. There's one that specifically has, I think it's like 6 or 8 legs, and then there's a couple that are drakes, so they have no wings. But I'd say probably 95% or maybe more are true dragons. So well done.
Yeah. And they look very cute.
They're so cute. Even the terrifying ones are like kind of adorable.
Yeah.
Thank you, animation.
How to Train Your Dragon franchise might be the most satisfying in terms of like, if you want to look and stare at dragons all the time, like this is the franchise for you, especially if you were going for more of like a conservation theme instead of just like dragons should be killed and slayed by knights. Like this is the franchise. It's filled with dragons.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah,
so good.
And talking about cat-like dragon ridery theme, the next one that we're gonna go into is the Inheritance Cycle, which is the Christopher Paolini books, also often known as the Aragon books, but they're officially called the Inheritance Cycle. And this is where Sam put in all caps, "No spoilers, I'm reading Inheritance now."
Yeah, it's the last book, and I don't want it to be spoiled.
Which book are you on? Just so I know.
4th one. Just started.
4th one, okay. That helps a little bit. So yeah, there has been an interview with Paolini where he's also said that the way he I think it comes through from the material anyway, but the way that we see Saphira, who's the main dragon that we interact with in the books, move is based on cats. So she is very cat-like in a lot of ways.
Which is so clear in the first book when she's a hatchling. And it's like the cutest a dragon has ever appeared in a book to me.
Yes. Yeah, and it's one of the few parts that the movie actually gets pretty right, but it only happens for like 10 seconds, so But that's one of the few parts where I was like, and then it's just like, and now she's grown up, and I was like, oh, okay, whatever. The different sort of types is quite interesting for a book series that you might presume, if you haven't read it, is a lot about dragons. It's maybe not as much about dragons than you think it is. Also, there's not really different types of dragons. They're all one sort of generic breed of dragons. They look different. They have different colors. Throughout the book series, the ones that we meet seem to be, I think, Saphira's blue, which the name could suggest to you anyway. There's a golden one, we see a red one, and I think this might potentially be spoilery-ish, a black one.
I've seen the color of the cover. Yeah. So it's not a spoiler.
But they're all sort of described as, they're just dragons. They come in different sizes. The male ones seem to be bigger than the female ones, but otherwise there's just one species of dragons.
Oh, that's interesting. That the males are bigger than the females. I feel like in a lot of other things, the females are bigger than the males.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in this one, it's definitely the males are the bigger ones.
Interesting.
Typical.
Yeah. And I think one of the key differences again here to Harry Potter is that these while they're still absolutely wild beasts, and they hunt and they're absolutely vicious, they are much more described as highly intelligent. So the rider and its dragon have a mind bond, so they like communicate over thoughts, but they can also just talk to each other. But it's obviously that sort of shared mind connection is a very key part of the book series. And so there's almost like a sense to each other, but it also means if the rider dies, the dragon dies with it, because they're so deeply connected. It doesn't happen the other way around necessarily, because we do see former dragon riders who their dragon has passed, but they still are alive.
It's kind of like a familiar almost.
Yeah, it's definitely more in that sort of thing. And then because we only see so few dragons in a book about dragon riders, the one that we obviously interact the most with is Saphira, which is Eragon's dragon, and she's described to be very vain, and it's actually sort of almost a character flaw that she becomes aware of, but it's also like a lot of the jokes, and like she gets quite upset if someone doesn't think she's the most beautiful dragon around and stuff like that. So, and then if we sort of look generally how dragons are perceived in that sort of canon, so they seem to have a consciousness in egg form because they were only hatched for their rider. So they're so deeply connected with the human, or, well, not necessarily humans, but with potentially riders, because that could also be elves, that they can remain in egg form for thousands of years. So when we meet Saphira, she basically confirms, I've been in this egg form for thousands of years. I've decided to hatch for you. This is, you're the person I've chosen. Yeah. And that sort of mind bond basically happens after the rider touches its dragon. So they have like a, I don't know how to call it. There's like a thing that forms on their hand, which seems a bit inconvenient, a place to be for that. And they often, Eragon has to hide it, so to not give himself away as a dragon rider, because they live in secret at that point. But yeah, and then dragons have sort of intuitive magic that they seem to just be able to access through like ancestry memory passed down, but also because of the way that we are in the situation in general with the books. I'm trying very hard not to spoil anything because this all only happens in book 4. We don't really know how that works, because Saphira just seems to sort of tap into it as the situation needs it. She'll be like, oh, I didn't know I could do that, but I just needed to do it now, so I can do this now. But presumably in peaceful times, there could be some sort of more like dragon school thing happening, and we do see it a little bit in the second book, where Saphira gets to train with another dragon, and she gets to learn from that dragon. But they do have magic, so they're another form where dragons are actually quite magical. Mm-hmm. And in that particular story, dragons and their riders are almost treated like royalty. So they were the ones in charge as like a team, like a group of people. And then once Galbatorix, who's the bad guy in the series, overthrows everything, he sort of has his reign of terror. But people still can't really stand up to him because of, A, he has magic, and he has a powerful magical dragon at his command. So... Mm-hmm. And that's when Eragon gets chosen, he becomes the symbol of the resistance. And the first like real hope of the resistance that they could potentially overthrow the king. Again, I'm having to talk in hypotheticals because Sam doesn't know how this series ends. Will he live? Will he die? Who's the half-blood prince? Oh, wrong series. So differences between the movie and the books. The one movie they made, because there's 4 books, they've only made one movie. It was quite terrible, it
was awful. Aurelia, it was terrible.
I rewatch it last night just to refresh myself, because it's been 2 years since I read the books. And I was like, I'll just watch the movie. I know it was terrible, but surely it's fine. And it's so terrible, honestly.
It's so bad. Didn't they include the video game cliche line of "Let's finish this"?
Yeah.
Gross.
I think a lot of the problems is that they cast someone who just, as the main actor, who just can't act. And I was like, oh, great. I'm going to have to watch you for the next 90 minutes.
Is Jeremy Irons in that movie?
Yeah, he is. He plays Brom.
Yeah. He plays Brom. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just like the guy who plays Aragorn's half-brother is so much better, but he's obviously only in it for like 2 minutes, and then he's like, I'm off. And I was just like, yeah, you would be great if we actually got the Roran story, but since we didn't, I would have just liked you to be Aragorn.
Whole second book, Roran is like one of the main characters.
Yeah. But I think if we just look over the dragon, like the way that we see Saphira, I think they did her really well. Like she seems to mostly match how she's described in the books. One of the only thing is that she names herself, versus in the books Aragorn names her, and in this one she's like, "No, I'm Saphira, by the way. Hi, nice to meet you." And I was like, "Oh, great." But she seems like we see those like cat-like movements, and she I think they did that part fairly well, bearing in mind that, you know, the overall budget and CGI isn't the greatest, but, you know, that also just ages terribly.
At least her voice doesn't sound like Cookie Monster.
No. Although I do find her voice slightly irritating because it's described to be very deep and growly in the books. And then it's just like, a woman's voice.
Yeah. And it's very smooth in the movie. But the guy who did the audiobooks really did low and growly too much. It is straight up Cookie Monster.
I like his version better, though, because I've listened to those audiobooks. They're quite good.
Yeah. Between the two.
And apparently the TV show is in the making with Disney, so
oh boy,
I think there's no clear year or release date set, but people are sort of speculating it might be 27, 28. But yeah. But are they actually dragons? Yes.
Yay!
You can't? With what? Sorry, Tiffany?
I couldn't understand those numbers. It does not compute in my mind. Those numbers can't exist.
Oh, 2027 and 2028? Yeah, I know. It's terrible. The end of the decade is coming. We're already here.
3 to 4 years.
2027 being 3 years from now is mind-boggling, and I hate it.
And I think if to say what we said about Dragon, How to Train Your Dragon, if you go into the series because you're a fan of dragons, as I've just said, they are not in it as much as you think they should be.
Yeah, they're really not.
There's like, part of it is being that from books 2 onwards, there's whole chapters out of different people's perspective. They have nothing to do with dragons. So I think at least half of the material you're getting from those 4 books is dragon-free anyway.
Like, if our scale is basically How to Train Your Dragons as our 10, it's filled with dragons, and Aragon is our 1. It has 4. Harry Potter has more dragons.
I was going to say Harry Potter has less dragons though than Aragon.
Oh, do we get more in the 4th book that I just don't know about?
Yes.
Good. Well, the first 3 books, it's less than Harry Potter.
I can't tell you anything about inheritance.
There it is. Inheritance cycle. Tell us all about Dragons and Dragon Rider.
So this is a book that came out forever and ever ago. I think it potentially came out before I was born, by German author Cornelia Funke. And I grew up reading it, and I only found out recently that there's a sequel and a 3rd book that was like, I think the sequel came out in 2016-17, and the 3rd book just came out like a year ago. And my grandma, because my grandma and my mom and I went to a play of the original Dragon Rider by Cornelia Funke from like a neighboring school where they just turned this book into a play.
Nice.
And my grandma was like, "Oh, the 3rd book is like, I think it's called like the something with my name in it. Like it's I think it's the Curse of Aurelia or something." And my grandma just bought me that 3rd book, and I was like, nice. I didn't even realize there was a 2nd book, and I was like, I remember everything from the 1st book because it's been 20 years.
Did
book-
you read it?
Okay.
book.
Did you
Not
read
yet,
it
at
in the
some
original
point.
German? No, the first one. Did you read it in original? Mm-hmm.
I think I was probably like 7, 8 when I read that. So yes, I read that in German.
The book came out when you were 5, Aurelia.
Okay.
Yeah.
The original in German, or the one in English?
Dragon Rider is a 1997 German children's novel by Cornelia Funke.
Yeah.
Okay, because I think it was like a couple of years before it got translated.
Yeah, I think 2004 or something.
It was
I think
2004,
quite a delay,
yeah.
Yeah.
But to actually go into what Dragon Rider is about, so this one is a story told from the viewpoint of a dragon.
Mm-hmm.
So yay!
Yes.
I think if we're talking scale of how many dragons you see, because this is told from a viewpoint of a dragon,
It's
lots of
constant dragons. It's only dragons.
And essentially, yeah, it really is. And essentially, it's about a dragon tribe trying to reach the Rim of Heaven, as it's called, which is the Himalayas, because they were ousted to Scotland. So quite a distance to cover. And there is a bad or like evil dragon, which turns out is only actually a homunculus. Also, huge spoilers for Dragon Rider, by the way. I just gave out the final plot point away. Which is his name is Nettlebrand. So that is actually a toad, but that looks like a dragon, and that's basically their big antagonist that they're fighting. So that one is actually not a dragon, but the other dragons that we see are called silver dragons, and one of the things is they forgot how to fly during the day, so they only are able to fly during the moonlight, and that's one of the key parts of this book. That,
nice.
The dragons can only fly in the moonlight.
That's unique.
Yeah. But there's still, as far as I could tell, only one type of dragons, which are those silver dragons. But I might just be wrong because I haven't read the sequel, and so I think potentially some things have changed.
Listen, sometimes just having one type of dragon is not bad. When we get to Dragonlance, there's a lot of them, and it's not great.
More or less than 85.
less than 85, but you'll see what I mean by not great.
Okay. So what's the general outlook on dragons in canon? So as I've said, at one time dragons and griffins were united in common defense of good, but they were eventually estranged. The griffins came to see dragons as their arch rivals and were very eager to prove themselves superior. And among humans, the view of dragons varied. So with those in Asia, seeing them as bringers of good luck, and more Western population viewed them as creatures of evil. And that's why humans tried to slay dragons, and this is why they sort of got ousted. And this tribe that we're following in that story is like somewhere hidden in the Scottish Highlands. And but we also have the dragon rider here. So over the course of time, a number of humans bonded with dragons. So dragon riders do exist in this, which is, I think, no surprise considering the book is named Dragon Rider. And then, as I said, that evil dragon is an artificial dragon created by an alchemist, and he wants to basically create gold, as is a common goal of most alchemists. So he's basically created that evil dragon to hunt down and kill the other dragons, because he finds out that he can use the horns of those dragons to create gold. So that's his evil origin story.
Brutal.
Yeah, and
Amazing.
that is also, again, why the dragons went into hiding.
Oof.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sierra informed me that there was a movie.
Yes.
I did not know that.
There was a movie. So there is a movie. It is an animated movie. And it has an amazing voice cast. Thomas Brody Sangster, Freddie Highmore, Felicity Jones, Nonzo Anazi, who is Daxos in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Patrick Stewart. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. There's just so many people, and I was like, oh, I did not realize that all of these people were in this little animated movie. So that was pretty interesting.
And it was created for German TV, that animated movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is what I've seen when I looked it up. So it was specifically created for Germany in German, and then the English version still had this amazing cast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is pretty wild. But yeah, it's really. I was looking it up because I was going, I think there was a movie or something, and I looked up and went, what? All of these people?
Who's in this? That's amazing.
Yeah.
I have to check it out. I was trying to find it, but then I had to watch Aragon. So
fair enough.
Living my best life.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, they are actually dragons. They have 4 legs and 2 wings.
Nice.
Fantastic.
We're not going to talk about dragons and Pokemon for long because there's not very much to go over. But I basically just have a PSA announcement and a notice of 99 problems I'd like to nail to the door of Pokemon. Dear Pokemon, please get your shit together. It's crazy. It's crazy that Charizard, which is the 3rd evolution of a fire lizard, which has 4 limbs and 2 wings, and also breathes fire, is not a dragon-type Pokemon.
No.
It's a fire and wind-type Pokemon, which is fitting, sure, but not a dragon type. And when you consider that Altaria, which is essentially a cloud with a stupid face as a dragon, it feels a little wrong that Charizard is not a dragon. I mean, as I wrote in the doc, Merlin's left toenail, you made the Alolan version of Executor, which is a palm tree Pokemon, dragon. You made a dragon type. This is justice for Charizard. He needs to be dragon. Also, while I'm at it, I would like justice for Garchomp. He's super cool, dragon type. And he's the only dragon type to date that does not get Dragon Dance as one of his moves. Anyways, it's stupid and frustrating and I hate it. So Pokemon, please, can we make Charizard a dragon type? You're even doing 3 types now. Just tack on dragon type. It's so easy. He's definitely a dragon. It's fine. It's cool. I'm not upset. It's all good. Anyways, Tiff, does Dungeons and Dragons have any dragons in it?
Dungeons and Dragons have any dragons? Okay, I'm just going to speed run this because that's going to be the best way to attack this. There's chromatic dragons, metallic dragons, planar dragons, gem dragons, lug dragons, air dragons, brain stealer dragons, deep dragons, Dalmas, fang dragons, force dragons, mist dragons, moon dragons, prismatic dragons, radiant dragons, Raidler dragons, song dragons, sun dragons, stellar dragons, bishops, and then lesser dragons.
Whoa. What type of lesser dragons?
We've got dragon turtles, drakes. We've got hellfire worms, pseudo dragons, sea worms, glam dragons. Yeah, those like sun worms and wyverns.
Wow. There's many.
Cool.
It's only a couple. There are numerous different kinds of dragons within those different kinds. For example, there are different kinds of chromatic dragons: red, blue, green, white, brown, purple, gray, and yellow. Each of those have their different flavors and styles. But there's so many different options. One of my favorites to mention was the bishops. They're cited as wingless and cowards.
I love that.
Interesting. All right.
Why? Because
reasons.
As a little Easter egg, my Dungeons and Dragons daily calendar usually features a dragon on the weekend. And if anybody wants to figure out what day we recorded this, today I'm looking at a lion drake.
Nice.
Dragons are insanely intelligent in Dungeons and Dragons and major forces to be reckoned with. They are respected and left to their own devices unless they get a little bit overzealous, and then they become a problem that needs to be handled. There's no riders usually. And if there was, then one might consider if that dragon was doing magic to make it look like there was a rider. Dragons can also appear as humans in D&D. So they're terrifying, honestly. If you face one in a campaign, just hope it's a baby. Otherwise, he'll be crispy. Because of the vast number of different dragons in D&D, there's gonna be differences in what you see in the movies and different games, but they are always going to be insanely powerful. We have them sometimes as a patron or a familiar, a party companion, but usually they are just considered insanely powerful.
Sweet.
And are they dragons? Yes. There's dragons.
Something that was born out of D&D is a fictional series called Dragonlance. Dragonlance became fairly popular, I feel, in the 90s and the aughts.
Wait, I'm sorry, you clarified that it's a fictional series?
Yes.
Are you arguing that that the dragons depicted in Dragonlance are not among us?
Correct. Yeah, I can confirm. I can confirm that. I also can confirm that they're reptiles. Anyways, yeah, so Dragonlance is based off of a D&D campaign that was back in the late 80s, I believe, and then they turned it into books. The books that start the series are like Dragons of Autumn, Twilight, Dragons of Winter Night, and Dragons of Spring Dawning. Summer eventually comes out, but it's not. It's kind of like a sequel to the original trilogy later on, and then they break into all sorts of different stuff. And if you're really looking for like a kind of big, almost Sanderson-like experience, Dragonlance is right there for you. They're fun. Essentially, they only take the first two categories that Tiff was talking about. Well, there's like maybe one other category as well, but it's not as robust as all the dragons that Tiff just listed. There's the chromatic dragons and the metallic dragons, and then like one other kind of other category. The chromatic dragons, which are red, blue, green, black, and white, are evil, and they serve the evil godlike being that has been banished from this plane of existence, but they're constantly trying to work to get them back. And then there's the metallic dragons, which are good and serve the memory of a good godlike being. These metallic dragons are metallic because when the two godlike beings were trying to create dragons, the evil one was like, haha, no, they're actually mine and they're all evil. And the good god got really bummed about that, and so made statues to his dead children, essentially. And then when he died, put his life essence into those, creating the gold, silver, bronze, copper, and brass metallic dragons. There's also shadow dragons in Dragonlance, which are transparent and basically just interested in magic and very magical. Within these types, each type corresponds to a general personality. So like red dragons are huge, ferocious, the most terrifying. Conversely, to quote the wiki, brass dragons are outgoing, but enjoy hearing themselves speak. So it's not always great when we have various types of dragons. How do these compare to the Harry Potter series? They are entirely different. They are like as Tiff was just saying, they're mega intelligent. They're basically human level intelligence, much like the inheritance cycle, but they're not bound in any way, shape, or form to a human. We do get dragon riders in Dragonlance, where they're just straight up riding dragons. And we get dragons that like specifically want to mess up the heroes. And they're really trying to just kill to have political success, essentially. What's the general outlook on dragons in canon? If memory serves correctly, the initial Dragonlance world books, the dragons are feared. The metallic dragons don't really show up for a little bit. So we've got just like, oh my god, this blue dragon is coming to kill all of us. Oh my gosh, this red dragon is coming to kill all of us. And only when metallic dragons sort of show up does public opinion shift a little bit to like, oh, not all dragons. So that's cool. Are they actually dragons? Yes. In all of the art produced by the books, it shows 4 legs and 2 wings. So no wyverns here.
So some games I want to talk about. I will say I had like a list of probably 6 different games I was going to talk about, and I've narrowed it to 2 because I care about you all and your time. So we're going to talk about dragons in Witcher, focusing on Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. A little bit of mention of Witcher 2. I will, full disclosure, I've been waiting for the show to be over to binge it. So I've not seen the show yet. I know, boo me all you want. Half my family is like, I can't believe you haven't seen it yet. So I have not seen the show yet, but from my understanding, I don't believe there's too much in the way of dragons, or as they call them in Wild Hunt, draconids. So
is that the show where they recast the main character?
Yes.
Cavill. Yeah.
Because Henry Cavill wanted to be too accurate, and they were like, nah, we want to do stuff. And he's like, I'm done. Thanks. And now he's going to do Warhammer 40K. Brother? So sweet.
Is it Liam? That's him
Liam
now?
Hemsworth is the new Witcher, the like kind of first images and stuff of him as Geralt have come out. Well, it was a little bit ago, I guess. But that's kind of where we're at. So we shall see. Unless have they done the first season with him yet?
I think they did. I think it's out.
Is it out?
I have no idea.
This is how out of touch I am with this show because I'm just waiting.
Yeah. I watched the first episode of the show and haven't seen it since.
But I also wanted to play. To be fair, I also wanted to play the games first. So that slows me down a little bit.
Yeah.
I like consuming the original. I like consuming part of the original content, but I always do. I like doing game, movie, or TV show, and then the book, because 9 times out of 10, the book is going to be the best one. And so I like to end on a good note. In terms of when there's a game involved, sometimes the game is better as well. But then I get like, good, and then probably like, and then we end on a good note. So that's now you guys know a little bit more about me. But more about dragons and dragonids in Witcher. So Witcher makes the distinction between different types of dragonids, which are like the dragon-like creatures. We've got basilisks, which in Witcher are more like a cockatrice. Species have bird beaks, webbed wings, talons, poison breath. There is lore behind them having a deadly gaze, but it is untrue and remains just like an in-canon myth. There are cockatrices. They are ornithosaurs. Woo, that's a hard word to say right now. And they share both, meaning they share both bird and reptile qualities. So they have the head of a rooster and the body of a reptilian bird with sharp wings and feathers. That they are terrifying. They also have the lore about having a deadly gaze, which has also been disproven, but it remains a myth in the world. There's a subcategory of cockatrices called shriekers. They're usually stronger, bigger, have different defense mechanisms. Then there are forktails. These are wyvern-type creatures, smaller, less intelligent than dragons, and as the name suggests, they have a forked tail. There are also slizards, which are giant gray flying reptiles, similar to dragons, but with long spiked tails. It is worth noting these have 2 wings and 2 legs, making them wyvern-type, and they do breathe fireballs. So that's fun. There is the Dragon of Firesdal, which is a forktail that is mistaken by the nearby villagers as a dragon. So they call it a dragon. It is a forktail. They know this, but the people don't. So that's kind of a fun little nugget there. Then they have wyverns. So in this world, wyverns are an ornithosaur. So they're bird-like, but they've got long snake-like necks, long tails that end in tridents. Not just tridents, but venomous tridents. Yes. So that is fun as well. So they look slightly more akin to a cockatrice or a basilisk than a kind of more traditional wyvern in here. There were/are true dragons, but they're very rare. They were essentially hunted to extinction in order to mostly in order to preserve humanity, and also because oftentimes they were mistaken for all the other flying crazy reptiles that are terrifying and deadly. These true dragons are black, green, red, and white. Those are the ones that have proven to still exist somewhere. They have a breath weapon in relation to their color or an environment, like fire, acid, steam, ice, something like that. They are inclined to hoard gold, gems, and treasures. There are other types like rock and golden, but they are rumored or extinct. So they haven't been proven by science to exist anytime recently, but there's lore about them and stories about them existing that you can come across. Comparing what we see to Harry Potter, the Draconids specifically that we see, because at least in Wild Hunt, you don't see true dragons. There's a little mention of one in Witcher 2, where there's a kind of like one sequence with a dragon, but not too much. Otherwise, you're just kind of finding like text material and lore about them. But the Draconids that we see are brutal. They are they are just out to destroy, kill in great number, attack places, eat all they want, etc. We hear some tell of some brutal moments by Harry Potter dragons, but mostly they're like under control by the wizard population, at least like kind of, hey, stay over there. And the Draconids are very much beasts.
Unless they're sent on students. For
yeah, unless they're hired for a game.
Unless you specifically need them for something, yes. So yeah, but the Draconids, all of those ones that I mentioned, they are very much beasts. We don't get a very clear picture of the true dragons, but so it's kind of hard to compare to what we see in Harry Potter. But there are rumors that the dragons in Witcher drew their influence from D&D dragons, which makes sense when you think about what the descriptions that we have: black, green, red, and white, with the breath weapons kind of associated with their color. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, it sounded familiar.
Yeah, thought that sounded right. Then the kind of the general outlook of dragons in canon. Dragons themselves are worshipped by the Zerrikanians, but Nordlings think them the greatest threat to humanity. So most of the concern for dragons, comes from the threat of the other Draconids, which are highly dangerous and terrifying. So that is kind of unfortunate for the true dragons, but valid because the other Draconids are horrifying. Are they actually dragons? The ones that are specified to be dragons, yes, they are. The others, they make it clear that it's something else. Yeah, so that's my spiel on Witcher. Can you tell I'm playing it right now? And then my next slightly shorter spiel would be Dragons in Dragon Age. Ha ha.
Yes.
With it in the title.
Although much like Aragon, dragons are in it a lot less than you would think for being named Dragon Age. There's a lot less
dragons in a thing called Dragon Age. Yes. You basically just kind of come across them as things in lairs or to fight along the way, and they're almost all optional. So that's interesting. But you have dragonlings, which are the newly hatched, they're wingless little critters. You've got drakes, which are mature. See, this I found interesting. So the drakes here are mature male dragonlings that have no wings. The dragons are the female matured dragonlings, and they have wings. So only the females get wings, and the males do not, and the males are drakes. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah, and then we have kind of variations on the dragon. So there's mature dragon, just older, larger than a classic dragon. You have a high dragon, massive dragon that rarely ever leaves her lair except for the rampage, which takes place every century, wherein she will fly for weeks, eating everything and leaving devastation in her wake. This is prior to her laying her nest of eggs. So about once a century, she goes on her rampage and destroys everything, and then she leaves a bunch of babies behind. Then there's also the Great Dragon, which is an ancient form of dragon, very rare, rumored to be extinct.
So there's a rumor for those of you who play the game. This isn't super spoilery. In the first Dragon Age game, which finally, after 10 years, we're getting the fourth one, and Sierra and I are beyond excited about it.
So
even if the art style is a little
even though
different.
They just retitled it, and I'm like, that's what you've been working on?
Well, it's all been named after heroes for the most part, so they switched it from naming it from the villain to the hero. Because you are the Veil Guard, essentially. But there's a character that's called the Witch of the Wilds. You meet her in the first game, and she's very mysterious, and she can turn herself into a dragon. Her name is Flemeth, and she is rumored to be the Great Dragon, the matriarch of all dragons. And as we get more and more into the lore of the land, there seems to be a growing idea that is true. So we'll see.
We shall see. Yeah, general outlook on dragons in the canon. Fearsome enemies. Most of them can be left alone if you don't bother them or venture too close to their nests or lairs, etc. But they will eat you and yours, and they are not to be trifled with. And then, are they actually dragons? Yes, because there is a distinction between drakes and dragons with and without wings. It's just an interesting distinction that they make in it, but yes, they are actually dragons. Yeah, so that's just some of the dragon related games.
And we recommend them all.
I was gonna go into Elder Scrolls and all the other things, and I decided to we can chat about that at another time.
Yeah.
Dragons Part 2.
Yeah, if it's demanded, if you guys want to see Dragons Part 2, please give us a comment and ask for it, because there's so much to go over.
Just so
We've
much,
already done 2.5 hours, so
yeah.
Dragons Part 2 is always on the table.
Yeah, it was really difficult to narrow down. Honestly, I think when I originally started listing out, I had I'm writing it out on a sticky note, and then I think I went on to 4 or 5 sticky notes of all these different ideas. I was like, okay, we can't do all of this. So I have a question for all of you. Do you personally care about dragons being misrepresented in media? The whole dragons versus wyverns thing.
Now I do.
Yeah, I mean, dragons are dragons and drakes are drakes.
I was gonna say, I think, and obviously Tiffany, correct me, but it feels like you and Sierra probably knew more about dragons than potentially me and Sam going into this, because I definitely did not realize that the dragons in Harry Potter that we see are not actually dragons until just now.
I'll admit that I didn't do a whole lot of studying of dragons. I've fought a couple dragons.
Way cooler anyway.
But I did a lot of research of like what dragons and drakes had in difference for this podcast, because like I just dodged the fire. But it's been interesting to learn.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. It's even with the stuff that I grew up with, like, there was like lindworm thrown around, and I was like, isn't that just basically a big snake, like snake-like? But yeah, I looked at the doc that Sierra set up, and I was like, now I understand. So I think I like Sam, I will care much more about it now. When people say it's dragon, I will immediately count legs now. That's my new thing. Like,
it was fun for me to dive back into all of this, because I from the age of 3, I had like when I was really little, I had a big book about knights and medieval lore, and I got really into dragons for this little like reading book thing. And then from pretty much 6 to the age of 12 or 13, dragons was like all I wanted to read other than Harry Potter. So it was like kind of cool to come back and get back into dragons and see what's going on and all that sort of stuff. I didn't really care about their visual representation in media. Now I very much am like, no, that's a wyvern. And I'll be like that forever. I'll be that annoying person. But it was cool to like, oh yeah, the dragons are here, dragons are this, and I've always wanted to read Dragon Rider, and
for spoiling all of that.
Yeah. It's totally fine. I'll try and forget before I start reading. And then, I hadn't even drawn the parallel that like Dragonlance was based off of D&D until I read it while I was researching the other day. So it's been cool. I've been really excited to get to this, and I'm excited. Like, I used to read Dragonology pretty religiously. So I'm excited. I hope everybody gets more into dragons because of this pod.
Yeah, that would be great. Which, speaking of which, I have 2 more questions, which would be, in whatever we were talking about, is there anything that you now want to watch, read, or play that we may or may not have already talked about?
I want to read the Dragonlance books, because I realized that I have a couple of those.
I realized too. I've got one sitting like right behind me.
Amazing. You guys should. They were fun. They're fun. I want to play the Witcher game really bad. I haven't played any of them yet, and I have them.
Yes.
Are you doing the opposite to Sierra, where you watching the TV show first and then playing the game?
I watched the first episode and wasn't that interested, so I want to I want to play the actual games.
Yeah. I think what kind of, I don't know, I guess it's everybody's personal preference. I do not have a thing about necessarily playing all games in order, mostly because I messed that up twice with playing Assassin's Creed Black Flag before any other Assassin's Creed, and then I played Dragon Age Inquisition without realizing that it was part of a series.
Yeah.
So I played that first before I played 1 and 2.
Who's Varric? Why does he seem so familiar?
So that was interesting. I'm playing Wild Hunt without having fully played 1 and 2. But I've also heard that a lot of people have done that, and it's not a huge deal. So
yeah,
that's where I'm at. I mean, there's some stuff definitely in the lore that I'm like, probably should know what this is, or like Geralt talking about his different relationships or when things happened, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. But I figured out and roll with it.
Yeah, I think for me, I definitely need to check out that Dragon Rider movie. And I think at some point, very long distant memories, I watched one of the How to Train Your Dragons movies. So I do want to check them
They're
out
really
again.
fun.
Yes.
Because I definitely am in team dragons are good and we should protect them. And also
Yeah, for sure.
very, very down for the cat-like dragons. So.
Randomly, there's a movie that I saw just in like researching what we should put in this episode. I came across a movie called Reign of Fire. It came out in 2002. I know basically nothing about it except for that it has to do with dragons, and it's got Christian Bale, Matthew McConaughey, and Gerard Butler. So you can't possibly go wrong with this.
I mean, that's quite the list.
Yes, so I think that's going to be next on my to be watched list.
Nice.
And I will let you guys know how it goes. What would you recommend to other people that we haven't talked about yet? Sam, you mentioned the Dragonology book. I've had that on my list.
Yeah.
Part of the Ology series, Egyptology, mythology, etc., etc., etc. It also has a game. Dragonology is a game. I have it. It's sitting right next to me. And in that game, you basically go around and you learn about the various dragons, which are a European dragon, an American amphitheater, a cockatrice, a frost dragon, a gargoyle, which is just gargoyle, but I can't pronounce it. Asian lung, a knucker, a wyvern, and a marsupial dragon. Because they wanted to have one from every type of
We needed to
region.
have a pouch dragon.
They needed something in Oceania that was not in the water.
And still not a mammal.
So that was one of the ones that I had. What did you guys have?
This is not a recommendation for me because I haven't read this yet because I bought this book for my wife and she just finished it, so I'll start reading it soon. But I'm going to recommend, because of my wife's Goodreads rating, Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, which is an enormous book that a lot of people have been sort of lusting after its wonderful cover art and the fact that it matches up when you put them next to each other.
Satisfying.
And I haven't read it, but my wife just finished it. And she struggled between 4 and a 5, but eventually landed on a 5-star. She does not usually give 5 stars. I trust her on this. So if you are sitting there being like, I wonder if I should read this book. I wonder if anybody likes it. My wife really liked it. And so I think people should read it.
Very nice.
I'll have to check that out. I can't think of any other topics other than the ones that we've already talked about. So I can only say, play some D&D, roll some dice.
Nice,
That's an excellent plug.
Yeah, I think same for me. The only other dragons that come to mind are not major parts of the plot.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was gonna say the first one that pops into my eyes is the metallic dragon in PJO.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's not even technically a dragon, I guess.
Yeah. Fair.
So we're going to finish up with our 7 ingredients of today's special, which are the 7 dragons that have affected Harry's life.
Excellent.
You might struggle to think that I can find 7 dragons.
I bet I can guarantee I counted. I was like, did Sam actually read 7?
There's Norbert/Norberta, which is 1. The Hungarian Horntail, the Chinese Fireball, the common Welsh Green, and the Swedish Shortshot, which made 5. And the Ukrainian Irebelly, which is 6. But Harry, once upon a time, touched a little bit of blood that was on a wall in Horace Slughorn's muggle stolen house. And that dragon was alive at one point and gave its blood. And Harry touched it. And I'm going to say, because I just realized that you could also use this logic, I'm going to say with excellent headcanon that it's the exact same dragon that Draco Malfoy's heartstring came from. So that makes 7 because Harry also uses a dragon heartstring wand. So it's the same dragon, and that's 7.
Nailed it.
And I'm sure he's never had to once use dragon blood in potions.
And never used the sizzling dragon bogies that
Or
Filch
dragon
mentions.
dung in herbology. Or
To be
dragon
fair-
height.
To be fair, that's not necessarily one dragon affecting his life, I suppose.
No.
I don't know that it affected his life.
The blood did, because he was like,
The blood,
"Yo, gross."
that's what I'm saying. That's the one
Yeah.
I will give you the caveat and the specificity of how this was phrased.
That's what the 7 ingredient special is.
That is what it's all
Yeah.
about every time.
We served the audience 6 dragons and a bit of blood.
Hello, everybody. This is Patrick, your editor, and I couldn't contain myself. I just had to insert myself here at the very end of the episode because I've loved all this dragon talk the whole episode, and I just had to insert a few things here. So I think that the hosts did a fantastic job, and obviously the goal of this episode was not to just mention every single thing that has mentions of dragons in it, but I just had to shout out a couple things that weren't mentioned on the episodes at all. So I just had to mention the movie Dragonheart, which was a really popular movie when I was younger, that stars several famous popular actors, but the main star of the movie is Sean Connery as the voice of the dragon called Draco in that movie. And I remember at the time it being a really big deal, the CG and all that stuff, which might look a little dated today. But if you're someone who's never heard of the Dragonheart movie, please check that out because I think it's absolutely worth it. And it's very important in terms of dragon lore and everything. And Draco the dragon especially is a really neat character. On top of that, I just have to mention, and this must have just been an oversight by the hosts, and I don't blame them. Again, this is not about mentioning every single mention of a dragon in any work of fiction ever, but I just can't believe that they didn't really mention the Dragon Riders of Pern series by Anne McCaffrey, which was started, I believe, in the 60s at some point. But there's over 20 books of the Dragon Riders of Pern, like 20 novels in that series. And I think that a lot of the things that we talked about today that are more contemporary, anything that has to do with the Dragon Rider, and a lot of the other things that were mentioned on the episode today, including Song of Ice and Fire, George Martin, and all those things, a lot of those properties have heavily drawn influence from Anne McCaffrey and all the work she put into her Dragon Riders of Pern books. So if you are unfamiliar with those, go check out Anne McCaffrey and her Dragon Riders of Pern series. Now, I also know that Sierra said she doesn't want any spoilers for The Witcher or anything like that, and so she hasn't gotten very far. But as a person who has read and absolutely loved The Witcher books, all of them, and I highly recommend them, and has also seen a majority of the Witcher TV show, which I think is terrible, and I equate to the badness of like a Cursed Child is to, like Cursed Child is to Harry Potter as the Witcher TV show is to the Witcher series, and that's how bad I think the TV show actually got. It's actually unwatchable for me, and I refuse to watch it from about halfway through the 3rd season and on because it's so terrible. However, I do have to say that Sierra hasn't experienced yet the enormous storyline that has to do with a dragon in the Witcher universe. And so I'm not going to say anything else about that. I will just say there may or may not be a very important character that may or may not be involved in a very dragon-heavy sort of ish story type thingy-mabob. That's all I'll say about that. But she has that to, or not to, look forward to, as it were, in the future. Now, I just want to rapid fire out there a few mentions of some dragons that are pop culture dragons that I think are pretty important and should be mentioned. There's the band Little Dragon, which is a really cool sort of synth pop dragon that I recommend everyone check out. And their vocalist did the vocals for Noodle on the Gorillaz album Plastic Beach. So you all probably know her voice, but check out her band Little Dragon. They're very cool. The electronic pop band Dragonette as well, a single pop star who makes fantastic sort of synth pop music. phenomenal, really cool stuff there. I love her synth sounds. And then, of course, I have to mention Dragon Force, Through the Fire and Flames. Everybody that's played Guitar Hero knows it, and everybody who's in the metal community knows it, and Herman Lee and his YouTube channel and his presence online. Amazing, fantastic. Got to throw out Dragon Force. Of course, I could mention The Dragon, but you wouldn't know who I'm talking about. Am I talking about Bruce Lee, or am I talking about Cisco? Either one, equally as iconic and incredible. And the last thing I'll say, I know he's not a dragon, right? I understand he's not a dragon, but he's much closer to being a dragon than some of those silly Pokemon that Sam mentioned earlier. I have to just throw out Godzilla. Okay. Thank you, everybody. And I will now float away into the distance as the episode comes to a close.
Oh, man. Anyways, that's going to end the podcast on dragons. Tiff, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, it was great having you on again. Your in-depth knowledge of dragons is right there with us. So that was great. Thank you.
Of course.
Where should we follow you? Do you want to, what do you got to plug? What do you want us to shout out at the end of this long dragony podcast?
I still don't have any major social medias, but I will be happy to plug our D&D game that's on Patreon coming up soon. Nice. With you guys, with Sierra and Brittany. I'm very excited for that to be live for you guys to listen to.
Sweet.
Woohoo. Excellent.
Thank you so much.
And also, sounds like you're winning at life if you don't have social media.
Yeah. you and Christian.
Well, speaking of Christian, another huge thanks to him, who because he bought us this round of drinks at the Three Broomsticks while we were talking about dragons.
Thanks, Christian. Woo!
Made for a very tasty discussion. And if you'd like to buy us the next round, head over to patreon.com/3broomsticks with the numeral 3 to sign up. And we have different tiers, so if you want to have the D&D tier, you will have to, I think, look in the tier description because we do mention it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yep. Coolio. So there's lots of stuff in the works, but also if you just want to check out what's already there, I think we're up to 18 audio bonus content that we've released on Patreon, so there's plenty to check out. Among others, the Quidditch Qualler League that Sam and I started, and there'll be part 2 coming out soon for that, so check it out. And you can also help us by rating and reviewing us. And if you like our show, don't forget to tell your friends, because the more people that hear about our lovely little show, the better for us, because then we can keep on the lights.
And if you'd like to follow us on any social media, we can be found on X, Instagram, or Facebook. Our assorted handles and our email address can be found in the episode description or on our website, which is 3broomstickspod.com. And that is 3 with 3 spelled out as a word, THREE. You can also find any links to essays. You can submit a topic. You can let us know your thoughts. Any of that.
Next time you see us at the Three Broomsticks, we'll be discussing Chamber of Secrets Chapter 5, The Whomping Willow, which will be coming out just in time for you to experience flying in a Ford Anglia from London to Scotland and then being walloped by the Whomping Willow. That'll do it for the pod. I'm Sam.
I'm Aureo.
And I'm Sierra. Thank you for listening, and see you next time at the Three Broomsticks.
Cheers!
Give me big old buckets of butter beer. Give me big old barrels of butter beer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here of the sweet old butter beer.
This episode of The Three Broomsticks was edited by Patrick Musilek. The theme song was written and performed by the Faithful Sidekicks. Make sure to check them out at thefaithfulsidekicks.com.
You cannot possibly be bored. You're eating donuts and playing a game.
I want donuts now.
I know, sorry.
Pizza.
I also want pizza.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm much more hyped about the pizza than the donuts.
Sierra, give me pizza. Sierra, I want pizza.
No, she wants a pizza game.
Oh, well, I also want that. But can you mail me some pizza?
Yeah, exactly.